Hello and welcome to the Practical Leadership Podcast, where leaders share their tools and practical advice to make you a better leader today. My name is Max Kozlowski. I'll be your host. And today we have a special guest. Our guest today has dedicated his life to protecting our country. He served in the military as a member of the elite special operations community, has earned numerous medals, badges, including 2 bronze medals, Purple Heart, and the Meritorious Service Medal. After his medical retirement from special operations, he continued to protect the country through his work in the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, responding to terrorist attacks, school shootings, and other emergency scenarios, and even helping combat Ebola outbreaks in Sierra Leone. He is now the head of Conquest Cyber, protecting critical American assets from cyber attack. We know it's one of these ways that war is being conducted nowadays. And he's a graduate of Virginia Tech with a master's degree in political science and a cybersecurity certificate from Harvard University. He recently launched his new book called All the War They Want. And I could go on and on describing his unique skills and mindset, but I think we should just jump into it. Our guest today, Jeffrey Engle. Jeff, welcome to the podcast and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time. I look forward to having this conversation.
Yeah. So to get us started, I think I know where you're going to go with this. What is something exciting that's been happening in your world recently?
Well, obviously with the launch of the book, that's, it's been really significant. The feedback that I've gotten has been really positive and unexpected. My book, as you alluded to, focuses on, an approach to solving problems that it's really rejected by conventional wisdom and most organizations, but it's kind of the bedrock of how the special operations community solves problems. So the feedback I've gotten from the broader business community, my partners, and my former teammates in Special Operations Command has really been overwhelming. But beyond that, it's really the activity that we've seen in my company, the growth, as well as the advancements of adversaries and the focus that's now being placed on cyber resiliency within critical infrastructure after the Russian invasion of Ukraine and many of the breaches that we've seen, publicly most recently. It put a different level of focus on what my business, does day in and day out and has been doing for years. It's really starting to come into the forefront. So that's obviously getting attention that I'm not used to, having, lived in the shadows for most of my career.
Thank you for that. And, launching a book is always exciting. But I think in particular, one of the things that I really like about your approach is your approach towards leadership, right? Because in everything that we do and everything you've done and all your experiences, they're all centered around a different mindset and a different approach to problem solving. So let me take you kind of like way back to when you first learned about leadership or what it was. How did you first come in contact with even the concept of leadership?
Wow. In the Army, the Army values actually spell out an acronym for leadership. So, when I entered, I think it put that in the forefront. And I was 17 when I joined the Army originally. The Army values of loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. That acronym is aligned there. But I definitely saw it, throughout my life, even in advance of that. I just didn't know what to call it, right? I didn't have the context for it. But it really came down to two things, and it's people. It was people who were there for me when nobody else was, and kind of in the worst moment. And the people who pushed me to be the best when I didn't think that I was even capable. So, my first experience of leadership, even without knowing what it was, really came down to the people that ultimately I admired, either wanted to be like, or that I looked to for guidance and support when times got hard or I got lazy. And then obviously joining the Army just embed a particular approach to that. That's the conventional Army, and it just beats it into you with the Army values. But I really saw examples, leadership of both, in the context of what to do, and a lot of really good examples of what not to do that really came back to those two things. Were they people that are pushing you to be your best because that's what they had in mind and what that was what they were trying to get out of you because they believed you could be more than what you were doing. And were they there for you? And a lot of times those end up being the same people. The ones who are pushing you the hardest are also the ones that are going to be there when you actually need it. But to your point around the book, yeah, it's really, I used those examples, the context of my broader, earlier life and, what I experienced in the conventional military. I really thought, a master class in leadership when you get by people who don't have anybody else to turn to when things go wrong. And that's what I got. The examples in my book, they're really, they're not abnormal within the special operations community, particularly the special missions unit I was in. They're lessons that, you know, you take from them where these people have, a level of professionalism. They have a level of dedication to what they're doing and high standards for the people that surround them because there's nobody else to call. You really do have to rely on the people to your left and right. So I was thankful to have the opportunity to get published and share some of those insights, both on, what not to do and some of the examples that I saw from really incredible leaders throughout my time, in the special operations community.
So Jeff, how do you take those experiences and then translate them into leading people outside of the special unit, outside of the military, and give us a little bit of an insight into some of the less conventional approaches that you like to talk about.
Yeah. So it's been many years now. I've been leading the company for about the last 4.5 years, but I was out of the military and out of the special operations community for many years before that. And like many veterans, you transition and you think that the lessons and the skills and those types of things may have some translatable value, but maybe not directly because it's a different world here on the other side in the civilian world as it's referred to. So I went through what many veterans went through of, looking around and trying to reset on my understanding and my expectations and my approach. And what I realized is as time went on, there is direct translatable value, maybe a slightly different language, different level of expectation, obviously some restrictions on some of the things that you could do in the military and in special operations that you can't do out in the civilian world. But when I got the opportunity to actually be the lead and to be the CEO and to lead a company, and I realized that the only place that I had seen real efficiency and really good work that's done at scale when times are really challenging with really hard problems to solve was back in the special operations community. So since we have a mission that's aligned, I'm not a B2C, company CEO. I'm not, trying to sell things that every American is buying. I'm really supporting a very specific element of U.S. critical infrastructure and government where that mission focus has direct translatability. So I found that, having a purpose, having, a focus and a mission that's actionable allowed me to take almost all of the concepts that I had, learned from the special operations community and directly apply them here. So that's what I've done over the past now 4.5 years. I take all of the best things that I could from my experience and put them into action in the commercial world. And I'll tell you that they've been really broadly embraced, not just by our team members, but by the partners that we support. And they were looking for that, right? They were looking for an organization that's focused on being more efficient than the best professional sports team. Yeah. Where most businesses, are run with stovepipe, focusing on seamless integration. So it's been, a bit of an experiment to take, the direct approach that we had in special operations, everything from, selection being an ongoing process to only accepting the highest level of performance. Yeah. And put that into an organization where our competitors and and the typical profile of conventional businesses is the Pareto principle. You get 20% of your people produce 80% of your results. Taking that and saying, let's assume that that's the Pareto principle is generally accurate. What if we had all of our people that would be in that 20%? What would that do to our ability to scale and to address hard problems? And what would that do for the individuals in their expectations of their own performance and their teammates to really take somebody who has massive potential and help them fully realize it. So it's been an incredible journey, but you do have to take all of the conventional wisdom and understand why it's in place, and then where you can make different decisions than other technology firms or other cybersecurity firms or other businesses in general have put into place.
I really appreciate that idea for our audience, right? Which is really important. We always talk about 80/20 in business, and you're saying why? Like, who said it had to be 80/20, right? And you're saying one of the things that you learned is to set an expectation. And the expectation is that everyone is a high performer, not just some of them. Everyone is a high performer. So how do you build a team where everyone is expected to be a high performer and everybody is in that, there's no 80/20. Everyone is that 20%. Let me ask you something. So, I have some friends that are veterans, military community, even special ops. And one thing that is very consistent is the message about, how when you're in the thick of things, it's about each other, right? It's about fighting for the person that's to your right and to your left. How do you translate that? How do you create an organization where you take in that value of we're doing it for each other and make it come to life inside your business or inside your organization?
Yeah. So our approach is to approach the mission of the concept, right? So what we have the benefit with what we do of being able to tangibly tie the activities that we're doing and the customers that we're doing them for to the way of life that every American experiences. So it ends up being real for them. If and I regardless of the role in the business, I'm always talking about it in terms of ensuring cyber resiliency for the sectors that are critical to our way of life. So I communicated to customers, to partners, and internally. And even before the Russian invasion of Ukraine or the Colonial Pipeline attack, there are so many things that are happening on a day-to-day basis that are paper cuts against our critical infrastructure and our way of life. So I've tied that in a way that help people understand that there's a system that's an integrated system that enables you to get on your phone app, connect to an Uber, get to the grocery store, and feed your family. Or even if you've got the red outlets in a hospital that are connected to generators to ensure they're always up. That connected to the support of the oil and gas industry, being able to get fuel to those generators. So if you take down the power grid, you take down a healthcare system, and after 3 days, where if you can't get fuel to those generators, those patients in the ICU start to die. So we have that benefit of being able to make it real for people. And we also don't apply many of the things that other organizations do, where I'm a big proponent of, if you have a connection to somebody and you are bought into the mission and they bring a skill that's going to enhance the organization, then bring them in and we'll make it work. And if they're not right, we have a cultural accountability, a doctrine within the business that if it's not right for them, it's not the right role, they're not the right person for it. It doesn't matter if they're your mother, your brother, your sister, your best friend. You don't carry that with you. And then, because you're going to have to swim twice as hard to keep them afloat. So there are a lot of great people who are not right for being in this fight with us. So that consistent reinforcement from my level to my senior leadership to our people who are in more, middle management roles, all the way down to the individual contributors, is something that we fostered that basically makes our organization similar to, when you walk into our command centers, you're in the fight. You see our nation's most critical infrastructure organization. You see adversaries actively targeting it, and you see our team actively engaged with them to prevent them from going down or getting data that ultimately hurts our national security and our way of life. So I have a bit of an advantage organizationally because of what we do and why we do it and who we do it for. That being about the person to your left and right, it goes beyond it. Now it's not just the warrior to your left and right. It's, you know, your, your wife or husband and your children that ultimately would be impacted if some of our customers get compromised, and not just on an isolated level, like you have an impact on your bank accounts, or somebody, commits some fraud. We're talking about the critical infrastructure that enabled everything. You can't get food. You can't get clean water. We've seen, and because there have been those real events like JBS where you weren't able to get the meat, the Christmas, or the Christmas Eve attack here in Nashville, where our entire E911 system went down because the data center was right next to the road. The healthcare, people weren't even able to go to the hospital. There's so many now specific, tangible examples where people's way of life has been impacted. That when you start to see those aggregated with intention behind it, we are at war, and because we're at war, in the company, it allows us to have that real emotional, connection to what it is that we do every day and the people that we do it with.
So I really appreciate that you're saying, look, we have the biggest of purposes, right? And the purpose is to preserve our way of life, to preserve life. And I think that one of the things that you're mentioning that you're doing really, really well, which I think our audience can learn from, is how you're able to connect the dots for them, how you're able to connect what they do to how they deliver on that purpose and how they keep people safe. And I know that you also work with companies, and you kind of help them understand how they can do that themselves. So what are some ways that you think that, somebody that maybe is a manufacturer or in the food industry or in a service industry, how could they do what you do? How could they drive more purpose, and how can they help connect the dots so people are more engaged, and they see what they have in front of them as some sort of war, some sort of battle as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's really what my book is all about. I mean, we use cyber warfare as this is our purpose, and then getting into the examples of how you build and lead to solve those hard problems that you personally have passion about. I think that we as a country have gotten to a point where we look at work as something that we do to get to something else. You work to get the money so you can have fun on Friday night. You work so you can get the house to eventually have a family, and that we consider that generally that's our life. Work is not our life. And as long as you have this delineation, individually, that work is something you do to get to life versus work is something that is part of life, it's impossible to really connect to the purpose. And part of the reason is, to your point, people aren't able to clearly articulate the purpose. They don't have the transparency and the context and the ability to connect the dots between what they do and the purpose and the associated mission that's driving that organization, that business, to be in business. And in most cases, that can be accomplished. I think that's the leader's responsibility. And leaders, in plural, responsibility, to make sure that they can connect their mission to the metric, right? To whatever the output is the individual has connected to the mission. And if they do that, then the people who buy in and start doing those activities, stop having this delineation between work and life. I take exception to the idea of this work-life balance. If you hate what you do and you don't understand the impact that you're making, you're probably not going to do it very well. And you're probably not going to be very happy about it. So the spillover into life, where you're sacrificing, 8 hours of your day, 5 days a week, for 40, 50 years. That with me doesn't sit well. I've been fortunate that I don't think I've ever had that sentiment around anything that I did that happened to produce money to enable me. I have the inverse relationship with money generally. But if the leader can tie that back, let's say a critical manufacturing process, if you can take a step back and say, what you manufacture supports this function, and this function ties back to your way of life. And if there weren't you and people like you, this is what that, dangerous, nightmarish future would look like. I think some of our decisions as a country and all the way down to our decisions as individuals would start to change. Yeah. Let's look at, China's inclusion in the World Trade Organization back in the day and the massive outsourcing that completely destroyed communities. Yeah. In the manufacturing sectors within the United States. Bringing back manufacturing now has become a national security imperative. But if we took a step back and were able to connect what that manufacturing process did to support our community, to bring in other businesses, to enable, education or way of life. And you could tie it back to the tax dollars that were produced by that organization, in the community, what that community was able to produce, how many doctors and lawyers and military veterans and, all of those things that get produced out of that community. And then downstream, what that manufacturing process ultimately led to, you change the context for those activities. And I think we would find massive amounts of innovation that would be unlocked where today, people do tasks and unless they have a mindset or a desire to automate away that task, right? They do that until they find some other task that they want to do or that is going to pay them more money, right? So there's not enough context that leaders are providing. I don't think a lot of leaders actually understand the why, so they're not able to communicate it to their team. And if you can't communicate the why, you can't communicate purpose. With no purpose, it's just work. And if it's just work, then it's a simple transaction that's happening where people are sacrificing a portion of their life in exchange for your money. And I think generally that's sad, but more specifically, it hurts our national security and what we focus on and what we think is important. And ultimately, it causes significant reduction in our freedom, both to maneuver as a country and our individual freedom. Because I think that the closest thing a prison that doesn't include a jumpsuit and bars is doing work that you don't understand the reason for just so you can get a paycheck.
Wow. Wow. So true and so powerful. And I really like how you explain it. The company needs to understand its why. It needs to understand its purpose. And then I really like how you say how you help people understand how their work has to deliver certain outcomes and how those outcomes contribute to delivering on the purpose. And how you mentioned that, look, if we do what we're supposed to, this is the beautiful, positive outcome that we get. This is how we have a positive impact. But if we don't, then this is the hell there that will ensue because we don't. So you end up engaging and connecting with a higher purpose, and through cultural fit, you are being able to connect to the purpose as well. So the right culture connects with the right purpose, and then having the line of sight of how their work has an impact in what they're trying to do. And the other thing that I kind of heard you say, which is if someone is not a fit, it doesn't matter who they are, they're just not going to be here. Because if they're not buying into the mission, if they're not willing to be part of that, that group, which is all they are all 80%, right? Or they're all 20% delivering the 80, right? That the expectations that they're all elite, they are all excellent, that will not go. So kind of aligning all those things, which then leads to the extraordinary outcomes. And I hear a lot of passion in terms of what is happening in the world, what's happening in the country. And you're saying, look, you have the highest of purposes here because you're protecting Americans' way of life. But every company out there is contributing to that. It's contributing to the well-being of the community one way or another. So we all have to figure out the way to connect with it and connect the dots for our team so everybody can see it. That's really cool. Let me ask you something. So I know you study martial arts, you've studied the old masters, and you've also learned from your military career. What do you think are some leadership misconceptions that are just wrong or off from your point of view, from your perspective, that our audience here could really chew on and really make them think?
Yeah, I think one of the things I see in business that gives me pause because it ultimately starts to forces people to start to change their behaviors and their approach in ways that are inauthentic. Right? I think two things are critical as a leader. You have to align what you say and what you do, and you also have to expose a bit of who you are to the team. I think there's an unfortunate thing that happens when you are junior, or that maybe we reinforce growing up that ultimately result in a bad outcome, is that we put people based off of position into categories that are unrealistic. We try to strip away the humanity of the CEO. Yeah. And it becomes, because they said, or they expect a different level of performance or decorum or perspective. Where, I've learned this throughout my career. Doesn't matter whether you're a four-star general or president of the United States, CEO, or, an intern. Yeah. You are who you are, right? You just have a different job. And I think that's the biggest problem is the job of being a manager and the job of being a leader. It comes in conflict with the perception that we generate around the positions that are endowed with perceived authority. So I think that's a problem if either side believes it. If I think that my opinions are better because I'm the CEO, that's just as bad as if an intern expects that a CEO is supposed to dress a certain way or to speak a certain way or to act a certain way. Right? There's obviously a level of professionalism in the workplace that needs to be maintained. But when it comes down to it, your uncle is the CEO. You don't expect him to act like a CEO. You expect him to be your uncle. And I think particularly when you get into an organization like the one that I've been building, yeah, I'm in the fight with you, and I'm surrounded by people who are they are faster, smarter, stronger, that may have a different perspective and the right opinion. And being wrong, right, is great when you realize it. So what I've taken from martial arts that I think is really valuable is it's humbling, and sometimes sacrificing, perception actually help the broader team. The example I give is, I am a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've been training martial arts for many, many years. And when I go into Jiu-Jitsu, because I've been doing this for a long time and I'm pretty good, right? I don't compete in training with the white belts and the blue belts and the purple belts and the brown belts and even other black belts the same way I would act in competition. I put myself in uncomfortable positions so I can get value out of the training. And that means that sometimes that white belt or blue belt is going to cause me to tap, because I put myself in a position that was uncomfortable. And ultimately that meant in order to solve that problem in the near term, I needed to tap, which meant in that person's mind, they just beat a black belt. And that may be the reason that person keeps training for the next 20 years rather than quitting. So what I found in that is, one, the better, when you get really good, you learn that there are still people that are much better than you. And you realize that there doesn't need to be an ego attached to the particular outcome of what happens inside, of the academy. You don't learn that until you've been doing it for a long time. The first line manager always wants to be the right one, and they go do it because I said. But when you've been in leadership and experienced, great leaders as long as I have, the only thing that matters is the mission. Are you getting there the best way possible? Are you making people better along the way? And are you challenging yourself with things to set the right example, for the other leaders that are coming up? Because if you have a black belt like me come in and just crushing white belts and blue belts, those people are going to end up quitting, which means the martial art writ large is going to suffer from your need to win every round.
So I really appreciate you. You've given us a lot here. I'm going to mention a couple of things that you said, but then I want to focus on one. So you kind of said that, authority is an illusion, and it could be an illusion. So just because you've been there longer or have a certain title doesn't mean you're any smarter. It doesn't mean you have the right answers. So, we've got to be able to see through that illusion. And then you said, you've got to put yourself in uncomfortable positions to be able to challenge yourself. And, we often talk about how growth happens outside your comfort zone. And you're saying, when you put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, you might look bad, but you're doing it with an intention to grow, to challenge yourself, to get better. And another gem is, it's kind of like when you let your kid win, right? It's to build a little bit of their self-confidence. It's to build an image of themselves. It's to be able to make them feel like they could succeed and be better. And you don't take that as I'm less. You're saying I am giving. I am giving you that. And you need to be able to put the ego to the side and never forget the mission, and really be able to recognize that that's what it really all is all about. And that takes a lot of maturity. That really takes a lot of maturity. Like, how did was there a point in your life where you realized that, hey, it's not about me and what I know. I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I just need to be able to get the answers to help us accomplish the mission. It was there a moment where that like
Yeah.
clicked and it happened?
When I became a father, you know, when you start having we have kids that are able to start to interact with you, you realize that, them coming up with rules, them taking a strong position on things, them seeing you be wrong and kids are, the most brutal of all when it comes to condemnation when you're wrong about something. My son, if you say something that's inaccurate, he is all over you. Right. At the same time, because you set that example when he's inaccurate, there's a way to approach it. An example I set with him to also correct him, but do it in a less abusive way than a 5-year-old does to an adult. So I think that was definitely a turning point for me. But I saw a lot of great examples of doing that, throughout my career. I take back the work life comment that I made. You have to set if you're this practical leadership, right? So it all comes down to setting an example. Your kids watch you. They don't do what you say. They do what they see, right?
Mm.
Over time. I think the same thing happens within the context of, whether you're a coach or, a business leader, what have you. You want people to want to grow. If I went into scenarios and all I did was I only said something if I was 100% sure that I was right, then that's what people are seeing. That's the example I'm setting. That's the expectation that they're setting with themselves. And that to me is the problem. It means they're only going to take on things, to your point, that they're comfortable with. And I need them to be as comfortable taking on things that they're uncomfortable with as I can possibly achieve in order to have this, my organization continue to scale. So you set that example by making it okay. It may not be desirable to be embarrassed, right? But it's much better to be okay with being embarrassed to a degree, and that driving you to spend more time preparing and being accurate than it is to make them feel like if they're wrong, it's game over. So I reinforce in our organization, it's not about, not about being right every time. It's really about doing what you said you were going to do and being right as much as you possibly can because you've prepared. But I'm going to force you to take on things that I know you don't know how to do. I've got examples that sometimes I have to carve out time just to take on something that I know I've never done before or I don't know how to do partially to show them that I still got it. Like I can still do some things and not just sitting up here in my ivory tower, saying go do. Partially because I know I'm going to have to go ask them for their help. That's me giving my arm to that white belt and seeing if I can navigate through it without completely losing it. And there's, if I don't give up and I take their help, they're going to walk away and the whole company is going to know that I didn't know how to do something and they had to help me, which I'm okay with because that keeps them motivated to be in that position. And it also sets the example that's a completely right and good position to be in where you need the help of your teammate.
That's really cool to hear. There's a lot there. So I think that I want to go to one of these places that I see business owners struggle with all the time. And we're talking about failure, right? We're talking about stretching people, wanting more from them, allowing them to be vulnerable, allowing them to fail. But at the same time, we're saying, hey, failure could be devastating. Failure could mean loss of life, loss of our way of life. So in the highest of stakes, you're still saying there's room for mistakes and there's room for growth. And a lot of business owners that I work with feel like, like a mistake would be the end of the world and they can't allow for it. So that's why they're going to do it themselves. Or, they're not going to promote this other person, or they're not even willing to teach somebody else. So how do you deal with failure? Because again, you're putting people in a position where you're stretching them. They are uncomfortable. They want to get better, which means they're going to make mistakes. How do we deal with
Yeah.
mistakes?
So failure and mistakes, I make sure that everybody understands those are two different words, right? They're two very different states of being. And I have to provide a risk frame of what failure actually means, especially to leaders, right? To people who are expected to lead, and because they need to amplify and reinforce the message and the culture, that may start with me, but ultimately is determined on the ground level, right? So I provide that frame of what failure actually is. And for our business, failure is our way of life is no longer being sustained. We can't get food. We can't stock things on the shelves. We can't get fuel to the generators for the hospitals. We can't keep the power grid up. We can't get clean water flowing to our faucets. Failure for us as a business is mission failure, which ties back to our purpose. So that to me is oncoming traffic. It's not a scraped knee. And that's the way I frame it. I frame it very much like I do with my children. They're going to fall off their bike, get bumps and bruises. But if I allow them to ride out the traffic and they get hit, it stops being their problem. It starts being my problem. Now I'm dealing with the fact that I allowed my kid to perish. So that to me is failure. I contextualize that failure in the terms that I described, where it's mission failure, mistakes, or failure in a task, that type of thing. That's a scraped knee. Scraped knees are really valuable. I've got a lot of bumps and bruises along the way, ultimately resulted in my medical retirement from the military. But those are stark reminders of what not to do. That's a callus that's built over soft skin. Those are things that are really valuable when they ultimately get put in a position of leadership and they're helping to guide people towards the right answer. Right? They have now better instincts because of those scraped knees. So I think people mischaracterize what failure is. Failure is not the act of not meeting a desired state. And if you treat it like it's not meeting the desired state, then you'll never be able to scale a business. Because if you can't build, leaders, subordinate leaders and managers that are amplifying the message and aligning their purpose, you ultimately are going to end up in a state where you have to stay small because you can only control so much, directly as a business owner.
So I really appreciate how you're separating failure from mistakes and saying, look, mistakes are small things we get to learn from. We get better. They're great reminders. They probably improve our systems, our process, our way of thinking. And failure is kind of, from what I gathered, is, we've made some major bad decisions, right? Like we've put ourselves, our company, our people, our children in a situation that they shouldn't have been in. And it's important to recognize it, because it's kind of like, failure is not an option. That's something that we need to be working against, but mistakes are something to be learned from. So how do we avoid failure? How do we make sure that those big things don't happen?
Yeah. It starts with making sure that your organization is designed to work together rather than individually. So one of my biggest concerns around companies and the culture and everything else ends up being around stovepipes. We are a country that builds businesses of stovepipes, where I am a finance person. I am just in sales. I am just in delivery. And if something arrives in delivery's lap from sales that's not workable, it becomes sales' problem. And sales is pointing at delivery saying, well, you're supposed to deliver it. Everybody's pointing at finance saying, why didn't we hit the appropriate margins on the P&L? And it becomes a very reactive state. Now, once disaster happens, right? Disaster, I would say, is right there below failure. You're trying to do forensic analysis to figure out the why. And a lot of that why is because of the stovepipe. So if we just attack those, you end up with natural control that prevents you from going too far down the wrong road. We didn't mention it, but a couple of years ago, I became a pilot. So I couldn't jump out of airplanes anymore. So I went and got my pilot's license. And, the way I equate that is, most aircraft incidents come down to two things. Right? One of them is fuel starvation. Yeah. Literally, you ran out of gas, or there's something that's preventing the gas from getting to the engine. And the other one is called controlled flight into terrain. So controlled flight into terrain is literally, I'm flying the plane, everything's cool. And then, a mountain gets there before you have an opportunity to, increase in altitude or to bank hard enough. So same thing happens in business. Sales keeps selling something that's not profitable. It can't be delivered. Delivery doesn't know that it's coming. They don't have the resources in place. Finance, when they did their analysis, they priced it incorrectly and couldn't be delivered at those points. And it's all because the stovepipes didn't connect, and resulted in you either running out of fuel or flying into a mountain. So the way I prevent failure is I think about things proactively around, and I pull in all of those parts of the organization that were previously treated as stovepipes and force them to be an integrated ecosystem where they all have to move forward together, like the wings on a plane, the aileron, the engine, the GPS. They're all part of one plane, and them collaborating effectively determines whether you get to your destination or you experience fuel starvation or have controlled flight into terrain. And I think that for the larger tech businesses, I don't know if we've been seeing it, there's a massive layoff, massive layoff. And I look at those massive layoffs and I saw it coming very, very long time ago, because they were paying exorbitant sums for resources, which were inflating the resource cost, and they were hiring a ton of people that they didn't have an immediate need for. So they were subject to the Pareto principle, right? 80% of those people were not providing the value. So we're starting to see layoffs. And I don't think they're doing those based off of whether or not this is the bottom 80%. They're doing it just cutting out whole sections of the business. That's the equivalent of like dumping fuel because your plane is too heavy. It might work. It might allow you to get the level of lift that you need to get over that mountain, but it might also be the reason that you experience fuel starvation later. So it's treating everything as it needs to be proactive rather than reactive with forensic analysis, and making sure that all parts of the plane are effectively communicating and working together and compensating for each other when they need to, in order for us to get to, a safe landing spot. even if that's not the destination that was originally planned.
What a great reminder, because in a sense, we all know it, but in reality, we are not good at it, right? So the big idea is we have to be designed to work together, to work as a team and not to be siloed. And, being able to see far enough ahead. So, you were saying a failure happens because you run out of gas. So cash is another conversation, right? But sometimes you run out of cash and that's what will stall your business. But saying, hey, we are not working together, so we're not understanding the implications for each of the departments. Then you can't see far enough and you are reactive, which, you might end up dumping the gas that you're going to need later. We need to be proactive and we need to be integrated. And, we talk a lot about what we like to say, like an open and visible playing field where everybody can see what everybody else is doing and how that is having an impact in the game you're playing. You're saying, look, if you don't have that, then you might be driving, flying yourself into the ground or into a mountain because, like the front of the plane doesn't know what the back of the plane is doing. And as a big issue. And then the other thing that you're saying is that by understanding these principles, you could see companies making mistakes that could be avoided. And you're seeing how they are being reactive in that how that might hurt them in later stages. And they were just not being smart and working collectively. And, one of your comments reminds me of, whether you love or hate Elon Musk and whether you like or hate Twitter, how he came in and he said, look, I could manage this organization instead of 2,000 engineers. I can manage it with 30, right? Going back to the 80-20. And you're saying, look, there's a bunch of 80s that should, that there's no reason that they shouldn't all be part of the 20 that's delivering 80%, right? The setting the new expectations and defining new standards for everyone. So really, really, really powerful. Let me ask you this. So getting even more practical, I know you probably use a bunch of different tools, a bunch of different systems, a bunch of different approaches. Is there like a particular tool exercise that, is kind of like your go-to to help leaders be better leaders, or that helps you lead others? And if so, would you like to kind of share a little bit of what it is and how you use it?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the point of, I want to kind of hit the point of the 80-20. I think that the reality of 80-20 is that 80% is filled with people who have the potential of being in the 20%. If they were surrounded by the right people, focused on the right purpose, given the right mission as a concept, and led, to that. Now, some people are just never going to be elite performers in one organization, and they're going to be rock stars somewhere else just because of the culture, the approach, what they're doing, their level of passion. I think. But our approach practically, I've taken what we do in a platform. So we built, Armed ATK, which is kind of our flagship platform that's designed around unified cyber resiliency management. So connecting risk to operations and operations back to risk. Really like a navigation tool of where you stand in relation to where you want to be and what you need to go do by priority. So for people who aren't in cyber, not everybody in my company, came up as a cybersecurity professional, or even played a cyber role, right? I realized that it was critical that they understood it, but also critical that we, ate our own dog food. So I built something called resiliency ROI, right? The risk operations integration for business resiliency. And I structured it with domains of the business, like each wing, the ailerons, the rudder, the tail, the GPS. So they're domains, and then their associated capabilities in those domains in the business need to be able to meet. Other people look at that as an org chart, right? But I built it out in a maturity model. So every 6 months we perform a risk analysis business. We do the risk frame, we do the analysis, we look at people, process, technology, the maturity of our capability areas. We establish where we are and we set targets for where we're going to be in 6 months. And then we resource, we plan, and we execute to building that demonstrable maturity using that framework. So everybody in the company knows that we are focused on these 4 or 5 areas to mature the business. It's done based off of risk. We resource it appropriately. So if we're not investing in maturing a particular area of the business, everybody knows why, and everybody can get behind, us focusing on that for that period. And then ultimately it becomes something new in the period that follows. So essentially it's rendezvous points on a navigation pathway, and we avoid the mountains and we avoid, storms by doing the risk analysis and using that to drive, the day-to-day activities to mature our business. So I call that resiliency ROI, but it's very much similar to what we've done with the NIST cybersecurity framework to help normalize the language we use to establish clarity around expectations. Everybody understands the why, behind the what they need to go do, and they can get behind, getting to that target state. And then obviously associated compensation and individual bonus objectives, that type of thing, are all tied to those decisions, as well as, additional supporting infrastructure and technology.
So thank you for sharing that. One of the key messages I get from that is, you're consistently working on the plan. You're consistently working on the strategy. You're consistently evaluating the performance of the team. And to me, that's one of the big messages for entrepreneurs out there, CEOs, aspiring CEOs. You've got to put yourself in a place where you can spend time on strategy and on growth and on the development of the plans and the analysis of the plan. So that is excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to do a little bit of a summary. I'm not going to be able to you shared so many things, but here's a few things that really stood out for me. So I really like your approach when you're saying, one of the things about leadership is that it's about people that are there for you and people that push you to be your best, right? People that are there for you and people that push you to be your best, even when you don't believe that yourself, they are pushing you and they're elevating you to another level, which also came up quite a bit, right? Because we talked about like the 80-20 and how 20% of people deliver 80% of the outcomes. And you're saying everyone should be in that 20%. Everyone with the right systems, with the right processes, with the right support, with the right training could be high performers. And we shouldn't think that that's not possible. That should be our standard. That should be our expectation. And by doing so, we're going to take the organization to a whole other level. Talked about the importance of purpose and connecting the dots for the team, really recognizing the importance of the mission, what happens when you succeed, what happens when you don't succeed, and in the line of sight of how their work delivers outcomes and those outcomes have an impact on achieving that mission. So I think that's fantastic. Authority is an illusion, right? Just because somebody has a higher rank or position doesn't mean they're any smarter or they have any better answers than you. So it's important to recognize that and then put the ego to the side. Put yourself in uncomfortable positions that are going to force you to grow. And not only do they force you to grow, but they can provide something to the other people, right? They can inspire them, they can motivate them, and then ultimately you're all better for it. And it's kind of like you pushed yourself, you took one for the team in a way, but it ended up making everybody a lot better. Make sure your organization is designed to work together. And everybody needs to be able to see what everybody else is doing, working on, prioritize well, and communicate all those priorities is kind of what I heard there, because then people know what you're supposed to be working on and what you're not, and why the decisions are such. And ultimately, the big idea of you've got to be a CEO, right? I mean, a CEO has to be working on strategy, on macro systems, the evaluation and implementation of those, and to figure out how the organization continues to work better. So that's kind of my little summary. There was a whole lot more. Jeff, anything else that I missed or you want to add that, that we didn't get a chance to get to that you think would be valuable to just, reinforce?
Yeah, just one thing. I mean, you mentioned the invisible playing field where people can see what everyone else is doing. I think that's critical But I would go one further, that you have to be able to see the perspective that that person has on that playing field as well. Yeah, there are many examples, but I believe that perspective and perspective generation, like you need to be able as a leader to help a developer understand the impact of what they're doing on sales, and a salesperson understand the impact of a decision they made on delivery or finance. And if you can help people generate perspective, you can set the example for them on how to generate perspective. And a little bit of perspective generation killed a lot of internal conflict as you're trying to get organizations to work together. So that's the one thing I would reinforce. I try to reinforce all the time. As a leader, my expectation for you is you can grab that person that you're engaged with and whatever challenge that they're facing or opportunity that they're facing, and walk them around the field conceptually and help them understand what everybody else is seeing. Because if you can do that effectively, I think you can do more with, yeah, 100 people than most organizations do with 1,000.
What a wonderful concept. Not only does everybody get to see what everybody else is doing, but you get to kind of embody them and have that empathy and recognize what they're going through, which then will allow you to communicate better and ultimately do better, put it in better words than I did. But that's fantastic. So to kind of close up here, what is something that you're looking forward to that's going to be happening, here in the next few weeks or months in your world?
Wow. I've got my team coming from around the country, a portion of them coming in next week. And, I always look forward to getting out in the field, engaging with our partners and our customers and our team members. And when they come in and I have the opportunity to help generate some of that perspective and skill around perspective generation. I'm, absolutely a lucky guy. I get to surround myself with the best in the world, and I get to help them be better, right? Without any ego about it. So I'm constantly looking forward to that. This is, like I mentioned, it's not work life for me. It's just life. And I've got the good fortune to choose what I do, why I do it, and who I do it with. So, bringing together the people who jumped on board with with the mission I'm passionate about, who are working with me shoulder to shoulder to help solve, some of the most significant threats to national security in our way of life. I'm constantly enthused by that. And, whenever I see that, that light bulb moment for people and they're like, I get why this company is different. I get why we do things differently. And I get that from, our internal team as well as partners. So any opportunity I get to have those conversations and take on really hard problems and see people start to solve them and feel more comfortable about sitting at the table rather than, sitting in the back chair or stepping up, even though they don't have a title that, would allow them to in other places. So there's a lot more of that coming. That's how I'm going to spend 2023 is out there in the field talking to people, and internally here engage with, with the world's best team. And I'm proud to be a part of, let alone have the opportunity to lead.
That sounds super exciting. And again, I want to remind everyone about your book, All the War They Want. I think it's going to become one of those books, one of those pieces that you get to go back and reference and study and really learn from what you've been implementing and has led to all the success and ultimately, the sort of stuff that you do that is keeping us all safe. So thank you very much for all that you do and for sharing your experience with the world. Where can people find out more about you, about your company, about the book?
Sure. I appreciate the opportunity. So All the War They Want is it's on Amazon. I've had the good fortune. I think we've been the number one new release and we've made it to the top 3 bestseller. So, I appreciate all the support there. There's some information about me. There's an author page on Amazon. You can also go to Barnes and Noble and other places. Conquest, conquestcyber.com. And people are out there on LinkedIn. They can connect with me. I do have a Twitter account. I use it mostly for monitoring some of the shenanigans that are going on Twitter and out there in the world, rather than posting a lot. But if I get the interest of people to share some of the things that I think and that I perceive, I'll increase that as well. But I'm very open to connecting with people there on LinkedIn or Twitter. And if you want to join the fight with us, there are a lot of ways to do that. We're through the Thin Digital Line Initiative. There's a group on LinkedIn there that's really for us helping everybody else. Because my company just takes on the most high value targets in critical infrastructure, which means we're talking hundreds of organizations rather than the 400,000 that need it. So we started the Thin Digital Line Initiative to help build capability for everybody else that may not be able to afford, our direct support or solution is advanced as ours.
Well, again, thank you for everything that you do. Quick reminder for our audience, you can head over to practicalleadership.com, and you can download the summary of our podcast today. Keep the keynotes and action items available to you. So, Jeff, thanks again for taking the time. I think it's inspiring. I feel safer knowing that, a lot of our critical infrastructure is in your hands and that you're using, some of the best practices when it comes to leading people, and now open to teaching them to everyone else. So thank you very much for your participation today and for everything that you do.
Yeah, thanks, Max. I appreciate the time and I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Thank you.